So, Carl, let's finish with some other considerations around muscle building. We've laid out general principles of program design, but now let's get into the nuance of individualizing that.
Yeah, let's talk about the person. And I know we've alluded to it a few times, but the beginner is the first thing, or the first individual that I think about, and I think most people are working with. And we don't have to get all advanced with these people. Everything works. Bike erg intervals will make this individual's quads bigger, right? Like, if you and I do some bike erg intervals a couple times a week, like we're not going to see like significant quad growth because we've kind of been around the block a little bit. But for the beginner, everything works. Everything works. So with the idea of like minimum effective dose, just use as little as possible and just like, sit back and look at when those gains are stopping, and then that's when you start to intervene and add more advanced protocols or add more sets, or really start thinking about progressive overload and all of those things. Still give the beginner a really good program, a solid principle based program, but dose them minimally.
Absolutely. I mean, that's setting them up for future success, right? There's so much that you can do in that initial year or two that is going to make all the difference 10 years down the line when it comes to being a true advanced lifter and continuing to be able to put on muscle there. So, making sure you're teaching them those important lessons around how do I contract this muscle, making sure that you're teaching them the value of consistency and patience and repetition and doing the same thing over and over and over again if the goal is to get bigger. There's a lot of learning that isn't just physical that can
Yeah.
happen in this time.
Yeah, the goal for the beginner shouldn't actually be their goal might be this, but the goal as a coach shouldn't actually be we're doing this to grow muscle, right? If we talk about this in like a CCP mentorship group, what we have said was your goal is to learn movements. What are you doing to learn movements? You're doing accumulation phases. You're doing a lot of volume. You're taking the muscles through a full range of motion. There's a lot of tension that's occurring there. There's learning that's occurring there. And what is going to be a byproduct of that? The muscles are going to grow. So the client might be like, oh my gosh, look at me. I'm feeling great. But you're in the background, like designing this training program, and you're just trying to teach them how to move, right? Like you're trying to teach motor patterning, but they're just seeing some growth because of it.
Let's get to our advanced training. So this is where things get a little bit more specific.
Yeah, so the SUD principle, right? Specific adaptations to impose demands. So this is when this starts to become a thing. So we talked about the beginner, just kind of give them the thing that they need, and then they're going to grow. Then you get to the advanced individual, and now you have to be more precise. You have to be more precise. So, if we start talking about getting stronger and building muscle, those are two different things. They can occur at the same time, but the more advanced someone gets, they're more than likely not going to occur at a level that you would want them to, or they would want them to, if you're just like throwing the kitchen sink at them. So if we want to build muscle, we have to go back to the top, right? Like, how are we going to do that? What is the tactic that we're using to do it? Are we damaging tissue on a daily basis when they're in the gym? If that's the idea, we have to go for that, and we can't have anything around it interrupting that. So with the advanced person that is hyper focused on growing muscle, you're not damaging tissue on a daily basis and then going out for that 2 hour run that we talked about, or you're not damaging tissue and not sleeping at all, right? Like things have to be pretty dialed and locked in for that individual to grow muscle tissue.
This is something that we've talked about before in beginner versus advanced clients, Carl. But another question that comes up a lot is, can I build muscle and lose body fat at the same time? There's obviously some nutrition considerations that
Mm-hmm.
come here now, but let's say, we're talking about our coach who wants to build muscle for their beginner versus advanced client. What comes to mind when you hear that notion of building muscle while also losing fat for beginner to advanced?
Yeah. I mean, the answer is yes, of course, right? Like, genetics have a massive say in the ability for one to do that. It just gets harder when you get away from being a beginner, right? So the precision has to still be there as you get to that advanced individual. Because if we're talking about an advanced individual, we're talking about an advanced individual. In this case, we're talking about an advanced individual that already has a good amount of muscle on, or has gone through cycles of putting muscle on throughout their training career. So because that is the case, we start looking at like caloric demand for that individual. Like if I wanted to put muscle on, I'd have to eat significantly more food than I eat right now. Like, and I would have to like do that strategically. And I'm probably not going to get leaner as I do that. If I had different genetics, I probably could, right? I could, eat 3,000 calories per day, and grow muscle and lose a little bit of body fat. That's probably going to be challenging for me. But you do have some like freaks of nature out there that no matter what, they just pick up iron and like fat drips off of them and muscle grows. Unfortunately, I'm not that person. But yeah, it's possible. It's just more challenging as you get to that advanced continuum side of the continuum.
Let's hit on some male versus female characteristics and how that affects program design. So, a lot of education and a lot of like programs out there are focused on the male avatar.
Yeah.
For a reason, right? It's typically men who are chasing muscle building, but there's ladies who want to get swole as well. So,
Yep.
what would you say for them?
Yeah, females just have to do more. Yeah, they have to do more. There's even outside of exercise considerations, there's hormonal considerations. I just talked about the person that just like lifts a piece of iron and like fat drops off and muscle grows. Women just don't have a bunch of testosterone flowing through their veins naturally. So if that's the case, they just have to do more to put on muscle when comparing it, 1-to-1 to their male counterparts. So yeah, they have to do more, and it's okay. Not okay, but it works in their favor or your favor because you recover faster than a man. So when we start talking about the 2 to 4 days, the woman would fall on the lower end of that, right? So it might be 2 to 3 days, and she's turning around and doing the same muscle groups over because she's feeling good and she's recovering and muscles are growing. And because of the recovery considerations, she can train closer to failure more often. So with the guy, it's like, coming 2 to 3 reps short. With the woman, it's coming 1 to 2 reps short. And we're kind of getting like into the weeds. These aren't the things that are going to completely like change the way that a woman puts on muscle. It's just little considerations to think about. The thing that's going to put on the most amount of muscle over time is just continuing to do the thing. Especially for women. When we start thinking about like the tension and the motor unit benefits, that is very, very important for women. You guys just have to like keep it up, keep going. I'm trying to think if I've worked with a woman like this. I don't think I really have, but I've heard of a lot of women that just kind of give up because they feel like they can't put muscle on. They're just like, I've been doing this for like 6 months and I'm not doing anything. In month 7, it's just like something just clicks and they just start packing on muscle because of consistency. So recovery is faster, full body over upper lower for frequency because they have to do more, and training closer to failure.
Let's finish up with our older population. So, what do we need to do for the person who is past their peak?
Just be consistent. Yeah, be consistent. If we're looking at the older population that is a beginner, right, they're still going to see some really good effects if they're just starting to start resistance training. If you're looking at someone in the older population that's been doing it for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, they just need to continue to do it. They're not going to pack on a bunch of muscle if they've been doing it for 30 years naturally. But their goal should be, let's not lose the muscle that we have. So doing it consistently over time is the best bet for that population.
Absolutely. And I mean, that applies to anyone, the consistency piece.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, you do see a lot of, I don't know, I think about my weight room and at university, and like there's like a bunch of non-athletes where you'd see them at the beginning of the year and they're just like, and then you see them like 6 months in and they're just like massive. And a couple of them I knew they weren't like on steroids or anything like that. And I'm just like, how do you just pack that muscle on so fast? And they're like the population that's just like, if I just start doing it, it just grows. Like I can't help it. So you do have some people that just like pop really quickly out of nowhere. Those are the people that really need to pay attention to being consistent for a long period of time, because I think a lot of that population takes it for granted, and then they get to like 40 years old and they're not like pumping as much testosterone through their veins, and they're just like, why can't I get back to anywhere near where I was 20 years ago? It's like, because you've if you are so sporadic in your practice and lifting weights.
So that's muscle building considerations. Any like last thoughts you want to leave people with, Carl?
No, I know we mentioned it briefly, the nutrition and lifestyle
Yeah.
piece, but yeah, I mean, if you want to grow muscle, you have to eat food.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to eat food if you want to grow muscle. And I think the thing that holds a lot of people back from that idea is the question that you asked. It's like, can I grow muscle and lose body fat? Everyone wants that to be the case. It's just very, very challenging, especially if you have experience. So if your intention is to grow muscle, you have to be okay with not losing a bunch of body fat while you're growing that muscle. And I'm not saying like go through a bulking phase or anything like that. I'm just saying like eat so you can train and recover from your training. And then once you're at a spot where you're like, yeah, I'm pretty good. Okay, then go back into that, slight caloric deficit that you like to live in. But you got to eat. And you also have to live right? So you have to respect the PLGs. You got to sleep. You got to drink water. You got to move aerobically. You got to walk. You got to get out in the sun. You got to do all those things because there's a lot of downstream effects from hormones in the body, from recovery from the exercise that you're doing, stress, happiness, believing that you can do it. There's a lot a lot of positives that come from just like practicing really solid BLGs.
Well, Carl, let's leave it there. Thanks for that.
Let's do it.